In a restaurant in Japan, Yohei hesitated in front of the menu. Since childhood, he has not preferred family-style restaurants because the numerous options on the menu made it difficult for him to choose without regret. Choosing a hamburger might mean missing out on his favorite curry. Choosing curry, he worries it might not suit his taste. In the end, it was his wife Miyoko who made the decision for him. The sauce would be braised radish, the staple food would be rice, and coffee would be served after the meal. This hesitation has accompanied Yohei throughout his life. He is indecisive by nature and suffers from severe decision-making difficulties. Even when choosing a partner years ago, faced with the 3 women before him, he was unable to make a decision for a long time. However, the girl in the middle named Miyoko had an exceptionally charming smile, so Yohei chose to date her. Then, without any psychological preparation, one day Miyoko suddenly informed him that she was pregnant. In the choice between love and responsibility, Yohei ultimately chose to take responsibility. He told Miyoko that there was no need for an abortion and expressed his desire to always taste the miso soup she cooked. Thus, Yohei naturally got married and became a father. He also took over Miyoko's previous job and became a school teacher. However, when it came time to name their son, Yohei once again fell into painful indecision. At such times, it was necessary for the decisive Miyoko to step in. Whether it was naming or ordering food, she always acted resolutely and efficiently. In the blink of an eye, 27 years passed. During this time, their relationship did not encounter major problems. Like many ordinary couples in the world, they lived a simple life, referring to each other as the child's father and mother. Yohei hated making choices. He was more accustomed to living along a stable trajectory. Staying with his wife and son, maintaining the enviable family of 3, was the most comforting way of life for him. But children eventually grow up. As soon as their son got married, he moved out of the house. Unlike Yohei, who married because of Miyoko's pregnancy, he never imagined he would experience a 2-person world again at the age of 50. This change made him quite uncomfortable. However, for Miyoko, it was a new beginning in life. On the first night after their son left home, she decided to celebrate with her husband over a drink. Miyoko asked Yohei to prepare some snacks and suggested that they no longer refer to each other as the child's father and mother, but instead call each other by their names, which sounded more intimate. But when Miyoko softened her tone and called out to Yohei in a playful manner, Yohei suddenly felt a wave of discomfort. For him, a middle-aged man accustomed to following routines, this form of address was too unfamiliar, as if the intimacy usually hidden in the mundane aspects of life was suddenly brought to the surface, leaving him quite embarrassed. Fortunately, his wife quickly became tipsy, allowing Yohei to hurriedly hide in the study. He pulled out The Dark Knight Road from the bookshelf, trying to relive the feelings he had when he first read it, a book he shared with his wife filled with joy when they had just started dating. However, as he flipped through the pages, a divorce application suddenly slipped out, with his wife's name glaringly signed in the applicant section. Yohei stared at the handwriting, feeling a deafening roar in his ears. He gripped the application tightly, wanting to rush downstairs to wake his wife and ask, has she stopped loving him? Have they not been happy as a family of 3 all these years? But he was also afraid of hearing her affirmative answer, afraid that this family, which had been maintained for decades, would truly shatter. Thus, he fell into a dilemma again. Should he be honest or pretend not to know? Yohei pondered repeatedly and ultimately decided to hold off for the time being. However, the divorce application lodged in his throat like a fishbone, making him restless and unable to concentrate during class. At times, Yohei felt that his wife didn't really want a divorce. After all, she had mentioned wanting to renovate the kitchen at noon. At other times, he thought she might plan to file for divorce after the renovations were complete. Just as their marital issues arose, his teaching class had also been unsatisfactory lately. Before school ended, Yohei announced, as usual, that he would conduct home visits the next day, but was suddenly interrupted by a boy named Katsuya. Katsuya, with a cheeky grin, joked that his father was abroad and his mother was in the hospital due to an accident while dating a younger man. Asking the teacher how he planned to conduct the home visit tomorrow, Katsuya spoke cheerfully about his unhappy life, and although Yohei felt pity, he could only ask Katsuya to sit down. After all, Yohei had more pressing issues piling up at home. After school, a student named Akemi stopped Yohei. Akemi, with a serious expression, pointed out that Katsuya was making himself the punchline to prevent classmates from gossiping behind his back. Yohei should pay more attention to Katsuya's mental state. Akemi's serious attitude carried a weight beyond that of a student, and Yohei did not feel displeased. After all, it stemmed from genuine concern for a classmate. He decided to visit the next day and have a good talk with Kitsuya's grandmother, Reiko. Reiko was a stern and somewhat old-fashioned woman. She constantly reminded her grandson Kitsuya to pay attention to etiquette and emphasized that Yohei only needed to report on academic performance, not discuss unrelated matters. When Yohei mentioned the hospitalized daughter-in-law Naomi, Reiko's previously expressionless face instantly darkened. She always believed that Naomi's indulgence led to Kitsuya's misbehavior, and before the incident, she had been arguing with Naomi daily. This time Naomi was hospitalized due to an affair, and she wouldn't take the children to visit, nor would she let a woman who betrayed the family take care of the two kids. Faced with the strong-willed Reiko, Yohei could only awkwardly agree and then leave. During these frustrating and chaotic days, Yohei's favorite time was the weekly cooking class. Mashed radish with fried fish fillet, taro mixed with miso konjac vegetable soup. He was grouped with classmates Shinju and Samaire to prepare today's menu together. Perhaps because she had just gotten engaged, Samaire was in the throes of romance with her fiancé, and whenever her phone beeped, she couldn't bear to miss a message from him even while chopping vegetables. Shinju thought Samaire was still too young. Feelings come quickly and fade just as fast, just like herself, who after many years of marriage now found herself tired of her husband. Samaire disagreed and wanted to ask Yohei to testify that many couples in real life still love each other even in old age. In the past, Yohei might have smiled and nodded, but at this moment, he was hiding the divorce application in his arms, lacking the confidence to respond. When Yohei learned that Shinju also had plans for divorce, he immediately told her about the recent events. Yohei hoped that Shinju, as a woman, could clarify his confusion. Why did his wife Miyoko hide the divorce application? Did she really want a divorce? After hearing this, Shinju reminded Yohei that if he hadn't done something wrong to his wife, then perhaps it was Miyoko who had an affair. Shinju's words struck Yohei like a thunderclap, echoing suddenly in his ears. That night when he returned home, he deliberately walked quietly, pushed the door to observe what his wife was doing, only to find her holding her phone, smiling, and continuously sending messages. Taking advantage of Miyoko's shower, Yohei held his breath and picked up her phone to check. The profile picture in the message list instantly reassured him. It turned out to be a misunderstanding. The person chatting with Miyoko was actually their son, Tadashi. However, before Yohei could breathe a sigh of relief, Kitsuya suddenly fainted in class the next day. When he woke up, Yohei learned that Kitsuya had started a hunger strike to protest against his grandmother Reiko's slander of his mother. Seeing Kitsuya's pale face, Yohei realized that this was not a solution. Coincidentally, he was in charge of a cooking club, so he invited Kitsuya to come to the classroom after school to learn how to cook from him. Smooth egg whites wrapped around a runny yolk, poured over steaming rice. This egg rice dish had simple ingredients, but could provide a solid sense of fullness. But Kitsuya was not interested in participating in club activities, so Yohei had to personally write a recipe and slip it into the mailbox in front of his house. In another week's cooking class, Shinju continued to complain about her husband's shortcomings as usual. But Samaire was unusually silent today. It turned out that after returning home last week, she checked her fiancé's phone and discovered that he was still in contact with his ex-girlfriend. Samaire didn't want to complain all day like Shinju, nor did she want to silently endure pain like Yohei. She only wished for the two of them to truly love each other and spend their lives together. Was that really so difficult? Faced with Sumaire's question, Yohei was at a loss for words for the first time. After all, he was just a man who had nearly been abandoned by his wife. Having spent time comforting Samaire, Yohei returned home a bit late today. He explained the reason to his wife, but Miyoko seemed somewhat displeased. She sarcastically mocked her husband, saying that at his age, he still had young girls confiding in him. But Yohei was preoccupied with the divorce application and didn't catch the jealousy in his wife's words. Unable to bear the current situation any longer, he blurted out the words, "divorce application." Seeing the shock in Miyoko's eyes, he quickly corrected himself, saying that a lady in the cooking class had brought a divorce application today. Yohei brushed it off, thinking he had not aroused Miyoko's suspicion. However, Miyoko suddenly suggested that she would stay at their son's house for a few days because her daughter-in-law was unwell and needed her care. His wife's decision left Yohei feeling uneasy, but he couldn't find any flaws in her reasoning and had to go to school with a sense of unease. After school, Kitsuya specifically sought out Yohei, pleading with him to write a few more recipes. It turned out that after receiving the recipes, Kitsuya had made a bowl of egg rice for his sister while their grandmother was asleep, and both he and his sister enjoyed it very much. Yohei smiled and agreed to Kitsuya, but Akemi suddenly appeared behind him, looking at Yohei with a reproachful gaze. questioning whether the teacher thought a few simple recipes could solve Kitsuya's current predicament. That was completely unrealistic. Perhaps Yohei was simply not suited to be a teacher. Watching Akemi walk away, Yohei couldn't help but imagine. If Miyoko had told him about her pregnancy back then, and he hadn't chosen to take responsibility and take over her teaching position, perhaps he would have become a successful writer by now, famous and living a comfortable life, accompanied by beautiful women, instead of being anxious about his wife's potential departure. Feeling dejected, Yohei pushed open the door to his home, only to find that the divorce application, which had been stuck in the book, was now missing. He immediately panicked, his mind filled with images of his wife going to submit the application. But the night was deep, and Yohei could only hold that book, feeling despondent. The book stated that to believe two young people could love each other forever was like expecting a candle to illuminate a lifetime. Does this mean that I should not expect to grow old with Miyoko? Just then, my son Tadashi called, asking if there was a conflict between his parents. After all, his wife was almost fully recovered, and there was no need for his mother to go out of her way to take care of her. Tadashi reminded Yohei that his mother seemed to have been in low spirits for a long time. Every time he went to cooking class, his mother would hold her phone and chat with him until his class was over. Usually, once children leave home, couples lose the emotional bond that their children provide, making it easy for them to head towards divorce. Tadashi hoped his father would pay more attention to his mother's emotions and not let things reach an irreparable point. The next day, Yohei went to cooking class, but Samaire said she would not be coming anymore. She had initially come to learn cooking to make her fiancé love her more, but her fiancé's betrayal had shattered any illusions she had about marriage, and she had broken off the engagement the day before. Yohei tried to comfort her, but Samaire interrupted him. After all, Mr. Yohei and Ms. Shinju were both unhappy in their marriages. What position did he have to persuade her? Sumaire's questioning left Yohei speechless. After class, he decided to go drink with Shinju to drown his sorrows. Shinju complained again that her husband did not understand her sacrifices for the family. Last time she prepared a huge feast, and her husband, after tasting it, couldn't even be bothered to say it was hard work, instead mocking her for spending a lot of money on cooking classes just to make such terrible food. Just as Yohei was about to comfort her, Shinju suddenly gasped at her phone and hurriedly got up to rush to the hospital. Apparently, the doctor had sent a message informing her that her husband had fallen asleep in the bath and was showing signs of dehydration. Only Yohei knew how reckless Shinju was in her hurry to get to the hospital. She stood in front of the hospital bed, her right hand trembling, fearing for her husband's safety. However, after Shinju slapped her husband awake, they returned to their usual combative mode, arguing incessantly, one complaining that the other did not take care of their health, and the other blaming the first for being too controlling. Amid their incessant bickering, there was a lot of concern and care for each other. Yohei realized he had become an unnecessary presence and wisely stepped out of the hospital room. Perhaps every couple in the world has its unique way of interacting, and arguing can also be a form of love. Maybe he should find an opportunity to argue with his wife, and then there wouldn't be so many problems. But Yohei encountered Kitsuya hesitating outside a hospital room. Inside was his mother Naomi. Yohei encouraged Kitsuya to go in and greet her, but Kitsuya hesitated for a long time before finally letting go of the doorknob. He actually didn't like this at all. The more he pretended to be playful in front of everyone, the sadder and angrier he felt inside. Kitsuya also wanted to stop the gossip in class in other ways, but he didn't know how to do it. Just like now, he wanted to visit his mother, but hesitated due to the surrounding discussions and his own feelings about infidelity. Yohei didn't know exactly what to do, but he hoped Kitsuya understood that he had always admired him, and Kitsuya was not as worthless as he claimed. However, such words seemed too pale for a teenager in puberty. In the end, Kitsuya did nothing and turned to leave. When Yohei returned home, he found that his wife was already back. Recalling the subtle harmony reached between Shinju and her husband during their argument, he hesitated for a moment and finally asked his wife why she had hidden a divorce application in the book. If there were grievances, it was better to speak frankly. The couple should solve things together rather than keep everything bottled up. But for Miyoko, she was not dissatisfied with Yohei. She just felt uneasy, and this matter could not be explained in just a few words. Her hesitance made Yohei anxious, complaining that his wife was always like this, keeping everything inside and making him guess. How could he always meet her expectations? But when pushed to the limit, Miyoko also showed her impatience. She questioned Yohei if he felt superior, thinking he was the only good person in the world, unable to extricate himself from playing the role of a good man. When she was pregnant years ago, Her husband gave up his dream of being a writer to take responsibility. Did he really not want to marry her? Her words left Yohei at a loss. 27 years of companionship were reduced by her to such a cold cause and effect. Yohei simply picked up the application and signed his name at the bottom. Since this was what his wife wanted, he would fulfill her wish. Miyoko snatched the signed divorce application, grabbed her still unorganized luggage, and left the house again. In the moment the paper slipped from his hand, Yohei suddenly regretted it. But at this moment, no matter how he tried to hold on, Miyoko did not look back. As a result, Yohei was in a terrible state during his class the next day, and his emotions were unusually agitated while explaining. Seeing this, Katsuya instinctively got up and used a joke to attract everyone's attention. Watching him force a smile, Yohei felt a pang of heartache and quickly called Katsuya to sit down, because he knew Katsuya didn't genuinely enjoy this. After school, Yohei asked Katsuya if he had been eating normally lately. After learning that he had grown tired of egg rice and had been eating instant noodles, he invited Katsuya and his sister to dine at a family restaurant. For the introverted Yohei, actively inviting students to dinner might not be an appropriate move. He might say the wrong thing or do something awkward, but he still did it. Because Yohei didn't want to see Katsuya forcing himself to pretend to be mischievous to please others. Yohei suggested to Katsuya whether he would like to learn how to make a bento to give to his mother. After all, since the accident, Naomi had been deeply engulfed in guilt and unable to eat. And how could one recover without food? Yohei understood that Katsuya had always been a good kid, always thinking about what would be most beneficial for everyone. Yohei also knew that Katsuya loved his mother dearly and didn't want those concerns to hinder him from visiting her. Coincidentally, on Saturday, Grandma Reiko was going to an event at the recitation club, so Katsuya secretly invited Yohei to come home to teach him how to cook. In the past, it was always his mother who cooked for him, and he wanted to take this opportunity to prepare a meal himself as a way to repay her. When Akemi learned about it, she also came to help voluntarily. However, just as the three were chatting and laughing, Reiko suddenly appeared in the living room. Yohei quickly explained. Katsuya wanted to make some delicious food for his mother to help her recover soon. But Reiko's anger only intensified. She had returned home early today due to a sore throat and unexpectedly stumbled upon this scene. Reiko accused Yohei, as a teacher, of not setting a good example and instead inciting the child to go astray. She had sacrificed everything for the family. After her husband passed away and her son went abroad, she had been the one struggling to support the family alone. Her daughter-in-law betrayed the family for her own selfish desires. The child should no longer be in contact with such a mother, and taking food to visit Naomi was a mistake upon a mistake. But Naomi was the children's mother, whom they spent every day with. In Yohei's view, while doing the right thing was undoubtedly important, the spirit of kindness was even more precious. The clash of correctness could lead to conflict. However, kindness never would. The encounter of kindness with kindness would only nurture even kinder hearts. Meanwhile, Katsuya and his sister also held their grandmother's hand tightly, thanking her for her hard work over the years. Looking at the mixed expressions of pleading and gratitude in the children's eyes, Reiko's reprimand that was on the tip of her tongue suddenly caught in her throat, and she ultimately chose to relent. However, adolescents are always shy about expressing their emotions. When Katsuya stood outside his mother's hospital room holding the prepared bento, he still asked Yohei to deliver it for him. The tamagoyaki was loosely shaped, the broccoli was a bit hard, and the meat patty's edges were slightly burnt. Yet Naomi, holding this clumsy gesture of love, couldn't help but shed tears. She could imagine how much effort her son, who had never even held a kitchen knife, had to put in to make this meal. Did he hurt his hand while chopping vegetables? Did hot oil from the pan splash on him? Naomi was filled with emotion amidst her worries. She had not contacted her two children before, fearing to see the disappointment in their eyes. But now Naomi understands that the children have never blamed her, and she finally has the courage to meet Katsuya and Emi. After Yohei conveyed their feelings to each other, Katsuya, who was waiting outside the hospital room, hesitated because he didn't know what to say. Yohei smiled, believing that words are not the key. What matters is letting her know they are there. If you don't know what to say, just sit beside her and keep her company. Remember to say before leaving that you will come back tomorrow. And so, day after day, it continued, turning this into a habit, giving the love in their hearts unreservedly to those they care about. Watching Katsuya holding Emi's hand as they entered the hospital room, Yohei suddenly smiled. It was the first genuine smile he had in many days. Many things in the world do not need to be right or wrong. Just like a loosely shaped tamagoyaki is still delicious, the care that cannot be expressed is hidden in the daily companionship. which is even warmer. What Kitsuya needs to do now is to like himself a little more and not belittle himself to fit others' views. Kitsuya's reconciliation with Naomi is largely thanks to Akemi. Yohei knows that neither he nor Kitsuya is good at expressing themselves, but Akemi is like a small flame, caring for friends as if caring for herself, pushing them forward with almost reckless enthusiasm and straightforwardness. At that moment, a call from his son Tadashi made Yohei's heart sink again. It turns out Miyoko moved to her son's house last night, claiming she would stay long-term. She also presented the divorce application signed by Yohei. Tadashi pressed his father on how he planned to respond, but Yohei was at a loss for words. Is Miyoko really determined to leave? Would calling her now seem unnecessary and awkward? He paced around the living room with the phone, falling into hesitation once more. Yohei didn't know what the right choice was. This home is the place where he and Miyoko have lived together for over 20 years, with every corner hiding shared memories, the decorative items she bought on the TV cabinet, the scarf she casually hung on the hallway hook. Just like Kitsuya making a bento by hand, Yohei suddenly realized what he feared was not change, nor was it the unwillingness to part with the established stability of life. What he truly cared about was Miyoko, who always stood by his side, accompanying him through storms. Yohei is not good with words, but he remembers that Miyoko once praised his cooking skills. He then decided to follow Kitsuya's example, making a bento to encapsulate his love, using it to express his feelings to his wife. In these years, Yohei has actually made many choices to buy an apartment or a detached house. Should his son attend a private or public school? Have these decisions always been correct? Not necessarily. But regardless of the outcome, Miyoko always smiled it off, as if the result of the choice didn't matter. What mattered was the person making the choice. Therefore, compared to making the right choice, Yohei feared more the day when there would be no one left at the dining table to leave a light on for him. However, when Yohei knocked on his son's door with a bento, he was told that his wife had already returned. Yohei feared that Miyoko had gone to submit the application and hurriedly wanted to rush back. But he was clear-headed when teaching Kitsuya. When it came to himself, he completely lost his composure. What should he say when he truly saw Miyoko? His daughter-in-law suggested that if he didn't know what to say, he should just give her a tight hug. If he felt embarrassed, he could hold her hand. As long as there is sincerity, there are countless ways to express love in this world. Yohei hurriedly ran to the station, even falling without caring about the pain. But in the end, he missed the last train home. At this moment, the dull pain in his knee was far less than the emptiness in his chest. Yohei sat down dejectedly on the steps, unable to get up for a while. Looking at the intimate lovers in the train compartment, the feelings he had hidden deep in his heart for many years surged up instantly. Yohei trembled as he took out his phone, wanting to tell Miyoko how much he loved her, wanting to hold her hand until the end of life. As the train's taillights gradually disappeared from view, a familiar figure suddenly appeared on the opposite platform. Miyoko, carrying luggage. Miyoko had intended to send a message to Yohei, but accidentally left her phone at her son's house, which was why she returned. She and Yohei were separated by a not-so-wide platform, and after pondering for a moment, she finally opened her heart. The divorce application was, for her, actually a form of insurance. The usually capable Miyoko also hesitated over many choices. 27 years ago, when faced with Yohei's proposal, she hesitated, but it was not because she didn't love Yohei, but because she feared making the wrong choice. Miyoko feared that marriage would become a shackle, and that one day they would grow tired of each other. After the children moved out, Miyoko realized that she and Yohei had no common topics anymore. At that time, Yohei went to cooking classes, and every time he returned, he would share interesting stories about the wives in the class, which made Miyoko feel a strong sense of unease. She feared that Yohei would leave her, feared that Yohei would no longer need her, so she preemptively prepared a divorce application, so that when that day truly came, she would have the courage to let go. Miyoko's voice was somewhat broken by the night wind, and the reluctance and love hidden under her worries made Yohei's throat choke. It turned out that they were both afraid of losing each other. At this crucial moment, Yohei didn't know what to say to his wife that would be appropriate. He opened his mouth, gathered his courage, and just as he was about to speak, the roar of the train arriving drowned out all words. When the train left, Yohei saw his wife dragging her luggage, stumbling towards him. But due to a nearby fire, the entire station suddenly lost power, and the two had to return to the waiting room. Yohei opened the bento he had made himself. Next to the slightly deformed tamagoyaki, the scrambled eggs with tomatoes and the rice mixed with silverfish and burdock were still steaming. Watching his wife eat contentedly, Yohei spoke the words he hadn't managed to express earlier. He hoped to always drink the miso soup that his wife cooked. Although the miso soup was made from a soup-based packet, lacking in depth of flavor and sometimes salty and sometimes bland, it was made by Miyako for him. Yohei had not forgotten that when he proposed all those years ago, he had said the same thing. Now, having passed 50, they had spent half their lives together. If he could, Yohei would want to travel back 27 years and tell the version of himself holding the miso soup, "Never let go of the person in front of you." After hearing this, Miyako also asked him to take a message back to his younger self, not to always complain about Yohei's indecisiveness. He was just that kind of person, hesitating over every decision out of worry that he couldn't bring happiness to those around him. But he was, in fact, a good teacher, a good father, and a good husband. So Miyako could feel at ease in the embrace of the person in front of her. In the dim candlelight, on this cold and bleak winter night, Yohei could clearly hear the sound of his own heartbeat. There is no correct way to love in this world. True love has never been a perfect choice, but rather two hearts afraid of losing, two people afraid of drifting apart, willing to hold each other's hands tightly through the river of time, never letting go. After returning home, Yohei and Miyako went to the family restaurant again, and he still hesitated over which set meal to choose. However, at this moment, all the worries on Yohei's brow dissipated, and a hint of a relieved smile even appeared at the corners of his lips, because he knew that as long as he held kindness in his heart, and as long as his wife was always by his side, he would never have to worry about the outcome of his choices.